Welcome to BlizzCon 2017 coverage, brought to you by BlizzPro.com.
Hey everybody, welcome to our BlizzPro interview with Yong and Dan Emmons. I'm Kicked Tripod. We do the Well Met podcast. With me is world champion, nearly world champion, Ray C.
Why do you have to give me PTSD like that?
11th place. But we are with 9th and 11th. We are with lead designer Yong.
I'm lead producer.
Lead producer?
Yeah, that's cool.
You wrote it wrong, sorry.
I have not yet decided to usurp
We-
the production, the designer organization.
I think it's actually a thing now where we just get your title wrong every time. Because I think this is
If you ever got it right, I'll defend it.
this is the fourth time, and I think we've missed it each time. And we're also with someone I haven't met yet, but Ray, you have.
Yes, I don't know how we handle mics
It's
around here.
Dan Emmons, and you are the systems and content designer.
Yes,
Hey,
I'm on the live content team.
For more BlizzCon
I
20
design tavern brawls. I design live events, which the Hollow's End stuff that's going on right now was something I designed, and a little bit of the Fireside Gathering stuff too.
Yes, if you're enjoying the dual class arena right now, and if you enjoyed the Fire and Frost event, it's thanks to this man. He also did a crazy thing like Pirate event. It's also his fault. Yeah.
The dual-class arenas are the reason that I have been playing Hearthstone in the last couple months, because with no HCT points as an incentive to play ladder, for somebody like me, it's really hard to motivate myself to want to grind the top tier of Legend, just because all you really get are Twitter points or something for your rank 1 Legend post. But with the dual class arena, it's just been so much fun.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I think everybody has their ebbs and flows with Hearthstone, and it's totally fine with us. You know, we don't need everybody to be playing like 40 hours of Hearthstone every week. Especially, you know, I think like 2 months after or 3 months after an expansion ships like Knights of the Frozen Throne, I think it's a wonderful opportunity for us to do things like the Halloween, you know, the Hollow's End event, and that's like a fresh new way to engage with the game. And I'm really glad you're enjoying it. That's exactly why we're doing it.
That was the idea.
Yeah.
Good job, Dan. You're kicking ass.
First thing I've enjoyed outside of Heroic Tavern Brawl for like a fun mode for Hearthstone. I haven't really been into the whole Tavern Brawl, build your own deck, play the one-mana minions thing. But that arena is just so unique that it really pulled me in.
Yeah, I think going forward in events, we want to do more modes and cool stuff like dual class arena, and you know. I have a job to do stuff like this for the foreseeable future, so I'm looking forward to the next couple.
Yeah, and so, you know, with release of Kobolds and Catacombs, like, it'll be awesome for someone like you to then re-engage with the game and, like, try out the new cards and you know, like, enjoy that content. And with the new expansion, we're also releasing a brand new game mode. It's a single-player mode. Dungeon run, and I think for, you know, super high level player like you, it'll still be like super fun. There are like 48 different bosses, and you only fight 8 of them in a given run. And
Somebody is playing Hearthstone.
oh, I was so confused for a second. Okay, great.
We found the Hearthstone.
Yes, we
found Hearthstone, everybody.
God, thank you, Dan.
I'm on it. I'll dive tackle.
I know,
It's
exactly.
cool.
Yeah, and so I think for someone like you, it would be challenging. It'll be fun. Even for more casual players, like because regardless of your collection, you're gonna have the same awesome experience of playing the game and getting more cards and making your deck better. It'll be like a fresh, awesome way to enjoy the game. So I think it'll be good. We'd love to mix it up. You know, being able to play Hearthstone the way you want to play is really important to us. So playing it at a super high competitive level, you know, engaging at a more casual level, engaging in events like Hollow's End and having fun with that. And now with the new single-player mode, Dungeon Run, like if you're having an awesome time with that, that's great too.
Yeah, we actually had a question, if you want to ask it, John, about the new Dungeon Run mode.
Yes, the new Dungeon Run mode is really cool. We're really excited about it. Peter Whalen designed a game called Dream Quest,
Yeah.
right? Did that have some influence on the new dungeon mode?
So Peter was the lead designer for the card set, and going into the set, you know, we knew that we wanted to do this super cool fantasy dungeon crawl. You know, what is Hearthstone's version of kicking down the door and fighting the monsters and getting the treasure? And we thought the dungeon run, just the idea as a whole, was just a really good fit for the fantasy. And Dave Kosak and his team who did the missions, really kind of knocked it out of the park. And that that whole just the arc of starting with a small deck and building those cards over time and becoming a more powerful adventurer. It made sense. It fit for Kobolds and Catacombs. I'm super excited to see it, kind of come out and do its thing.
Yeah, we actually have a dedicated mission team now. So we have a set of designers who are focused on kind of making 135 cards for the set awesome, and we have another set of people who are very focused on making the single-player content for that expansion awesome. So, we were inspired by a lot of different games, like classic roguelikes and a lot of different kind of card games that are in this vector. And I think the mission team with Dave Kosak and Paul and everyone on the team really knocked it out of the park.
What type of technical hurdles did you guys have to overcome to implement a new mode in Hearthstone?
Yeah,
it doesn't come very often.
Yeah, no, as Yong likes to say, it was super scary to light everything that we had done previously on fire and then create something completely new. I mean, just technically, right? Like, there's just so much. Like, there's 48 bosses. There's a bunch of these new treasure cards that are all like crazy powerful effects that we had to put in the game and implement, and all of the art associated with that, and like all the bosses have really cool VO and really cool interactions, and like it's a huge amount of content for just a set, because we also have the other 135 cards, which are all awesome. And it was a big challenge for like the design team, for the engineering team, for the art team. Like, it was a massive undertaking from a production standpoint, even. Like, it's a lot of stuff. Like, I'm really excited to see it all come out, because we've never really launched. And I feel like this is the biggest amount of content we've ever released at one time in terms of just new stuff and new cards.
Yeah, and it's part of the advantage of having a bigger team now. Our team has grown bigger, and a lot of people ask me about, hey, what's that like? Tom's gonna bring up, and there's aspect of that I really appreciate. Now that we're bigger, we are we're a really well-oiled machine that allows us to tackle things like this, where it's like, hey, instead of doing single-player missions in a very similar framework as we've done in the past, let's try something crazy. And frankly, when the designers first came to me and they're like, hey, Yong, like the missions thing, what if we didn't do that? And then we just like built this entire other system. My first reaction is, of course, like, you're crazy, and then they're like, hey, Yong, but just come over here. Sit down. We built this prototype. I just want you to play through it, and then let me know what you think. And when I played the dungeon run mode prototype we built, I was like, "Holy crap! This is really fun. This really captures the essence of Hearthstone. I have cards. I beat bosses. I get more cards. I make my deck better. Like, I'm strategizing about how to make my deck better. Like, this really does it. Wow, this is crazy. Okay, let's go for it. And now we have the opportunity, like we have the ability to say, all right, this is really insane, but let's go for it. And I'm really proud of how it turned out for Kobolds and Catacombs.
So how long do you think it actually took to have that whole process come to fruition?
I mean, it's difficult to talk about, total number of man hours worked or something. But what I will tell you is that, we have a fully built out mission team now. And they've dedicated all of their time in conjunction with our feature teams to build out the new UI and build all this content. And it was a lot of work.
So it wasn't just from like the Frozen Throne to now. It was like it's something that's been in the works for a while.
Yeah, we've actually started getting further and further ahead of the sets released so that we can do cool stuff like this. It used to be that we were doing a set, and when the set was released, it was like, oh, we really should finish up the next set, guys, so we're launching that in like a couple of months, because there's just like lots of pieces that go into launching a set, then just like not even just designing the cards, but figuring out launch windows and making sure everything's localized, and like all the teams work really well together. This, like Yong was saying, our team has grown bigger, and one of the benefits of that is we can give ourselves a little bit more breathing room to do cool stuff like dungeon runs and create new exciting features.
That is awesome. So now moving away a little bit from the single player mode, I have a more competitive question to ask, and
we'll try to answer it.
With the new legendary weapons, did you guys have any fears that the metagame would kind of revolve around weapons and weapon destruction and like huge swing turns involving Harrison Jones, since I'm assuming that the weapons have high durability, to try to make them less vulnerable to things like just the one Bloodsail Corsair or something like that. Like you need to dedicate a specific tech slot to deal with them. But are you afraid of those swing turns being too much?
I mean, I think that there's always a risk involved in printing any card ever. I will say that like the idea for these cards isn't that like, oh, the priest weapon is OP, it goes in every priest deck. Like the goal is that we want to create new priest decks or support a specific kind of priest deck where, like for the Dragon Soul card, right, you're play 3 spells in turn, get a dragon. Like that's a super cool effect. You don't put that on every priest deck. Like the mage weapon, draw 3 cards every turn. You don't put that on every mage deck. So the goal is that we want to make sure that each, that there is a deck in that class that would use it, but it's not just like, oh, the druid deck of the format and the mage deck of the format and the shaman deck of the format all play this weapon, therefore you should be maining Harrison Jones in every deck. I think that like, it's a like, you guys are like, the live servers are going to play more games on the first day than we can play in a year. Yeah. Like, so, we're going to watch it and keep track of it. And if like, the metagame is shifting towards everybody's playing weapon destruction and, it's not balancing itself out, we'll step in and we'll see if we need to make changes. But, like in the world where people are maining Harrison Jones, that also puts a little bit of negative pressure to run weapons. And like, oh, well, what if I run the version without a weapon and I play the Spellstones instead? And like, now you're playing these Spellstones where you care about overload cards or something else. I think that's the world we're targeting, and I'm excited to see the cards come out and do some cool stuff.
When you guys do internal testing, does your metagame evolve in the testing? So you were talking about how you have weapon removal, and then you have the weapons, and then you switch to Spellstones and stuff. When you guys do internal testing, do you guys actually play enough games to see the metagame evolve in your own small circle?
A little bit, yeah. Like it's kind of hard because when we play games, we're operating with a set that changes all the time, right? Because we play tests, we play bunches and bunches of games, and we say it's like, okay, these 2 cards need to be knocked down a little bit. We can buff this card over here. So when we do notice, like there are definitely moments where it's like, okay, well, we're testing all the legendary weapons. We want to make sure that these cards are good in a vacuum. So we'll just like nobody's teching in Harrison Jones in that world because we just want to test them out in the vacuum, right? But as things go on further and further, if people notice like, hey, everybody's playing these weapons, somebody mentioning like, I would put Harrison Jones in every deck, we'll take a look at that and sort of like readjust and figure out where we want to be.
Yeah, I mean, Final Design team does a very good job at kind of simulating what we think will be the meta situation, and then figuring out how we think the meta will shift, and then adjust the cards accordingly.
With legendary weapons, we're now seeing every class able to wield weapons. We kind of got a little bit of that with Medivh, and a big reason why, or a big theme, I guess, the Hearthstone team has talked about is class identity. Yeah. Do you think that adding weapons to every class help shape that class identity, or is it kind of homogenizing them a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's always interesting to have exception to the rule. Absolutely, the rule has been that the weapon-wielding classes like Paladin and Hunter and Warrior are the ones with weapons. And, Mage and some of those cloth casters, they're identified by the absence of weapons. But, we're making a set about going into a dungeon and fighting the dragon and avoiding the trap, and you get to the treasure chest and you go there. Why? Like, why are you doing all this? It's not maybe for a little bit of glory, but you go there for the treasure. So we really wanted to make sure that all 9 classes have that treasure that they aspire towards. And, at the same time, we really wanted to make sure that it doesn't mess with this class identity that we really care about. So, if you look at the 2 cloth casting legendary weapons that we announced, they're not the kind of weapons you like take into your hand and you bash the other guy's face with. Dragon Soul stays in your hand. In some ways, we call it a weapon, but it's more like an artifact or an item in your hand. Same with Aluneth. So I think that's the way we're balancing this thing out. Yes, all these classes get weapons, but they are kind of this legendary item that complements that class's identity.
So one thing is that when we were doing Well Met, me and JR actually predicted that this set would either have legendary weapons or a new archetype or new card class called Artifact, which would be like a permanent effect once you play it that has its own kind of slot, kind of like when Corpse Flower dies, it just takes that spot.
Sure, yeah.
So like a
Sounds like a good idea.
I am making no statements.
so like an artifact, you know what I mean by
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
But in the WoW game, there are legendary weapons and artifacts. So is that whole legendary, is that based off of the game having that?
I mean, the reason why legendary weapons are this set and not a different set is because of the Kobolds and Catacombs theme, right? You know, when we approach making a set we approach it from making different angles. Like, what would be an interesting mechanic to run? Like, what would be a cool theme? And like, what cards support that theme? We're always kind of adjusting. And when you sit down and we decided, okay, we're going to do the dungeon set. What needs to be in this set? And it's like, well, we need to have traps, we need to have monsters, and we need to have super cool treasure that you get out of the dungeon. And the coolest possible version of treasure is like the legendary weapon for your class. Like, why do you go into the WoW dungeon? To get the weapon for your class. Why do you go into the Diablo dungeon? To get the next best weapon. So it was kind of slam dunk from a flavor perspective, and like that's why we want to do the legendary weapons in this set, and why it made the most sense here.
Yeah, in some ways, like these weapons are almost like a character. Some of these weapons actually are so legendary that they've gained sentience. So some of them will talk to you while you equip them and play with them. Someone might comment on your bad play, perhaps. It's really fun. I think everyone's going to really enjoy these legendary weapons.
So what you're telling me is Ray is my legendary weapon because he comments on my bad play all the time.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
100%.
You're my artifact, Ray.
This is the most heartwarming story I've ever heard.
You're my
Yeah.
you're my legendary weapon.
Oh, Young, I didn't know you. I never knew you felt that way. Oh man, this is getting
hot in here.
Yeah, I know. I was gonna say I should take this.
Take off our shit.
Yeah, okay.
I'm wearing
Oh,
I'm wearing short sleeves. Yeah,
yeah.
I'm ready.
Let's talk a little bit about Recruit. So Recruit is the new mechanic that we're getting in Kobolds and Catacombs.
Mhm.
And, of course, Ray immediately goes to the competitive spin on it, and he's like, wow, there's some really crazy
I'm
combos.
literally just searching through like all the cards already. If there's a recruit card that says recruit a minion, like I think there was one revealed that was a
Yeah.
spell that recruits a minion for warrior,
Mhm.
and then immediately going, okay, how can I make this as busted
What's
as
the
possible?
best possible minion
Like-
that I could put in your deck? Yeah.
Right, like are you afraid of that mechanic being abused for oppressive combos?
So there's always the chance, right? I mean, I think one of the things that makes collectible card games the most fun is the idea that you'll find the next big deck. Like, you'll find the broken thing that we forgot about because, like, it's, I did it. I figured that thing out. And I think the recruit cards are really good because you have to build decks to do that, and they give you a lot of flexibility to do that. So when you say just, like, recruit a minion, like, yeah, you want to find the biggest one, but it forces you to kind of pay a cost in your deck building, right? Like, if you draw that one minion, then your combo's dead unless you have other minions in your deck, but then you're losing consistency and hitting your combo. So I think the thing that I like most about the recruit cards is they force you to make decisions in terms of how you want to play or how you want to build your deck in order to best maximize that without losing value. So I think the recruit cards that are kind of more specific, right? Like we have one that's like recruit a minion that costs 4 or less. And that one is like, okay, now I might want to change my deck to be, maybe I cut out some more of the 2 drops and the 3 drops to try and get the most value by hitting a 4. But, I don't really want to like upturn my whole game plan for it.
Do you think that there's going to be recruit minions that are played as a tempo-based minion, like this is a good body, it's going to get another good body, or do you see it as being, this is a card that is going to get the specific costed card for a combo or just for maybe value, so then it becomes good, like you get a loot hoarder because you only play loot hoarders as your lower drops?
I mean, honestly, this whole conversation is what gets me excited about the recruit mechanic. Like, it's going to make you look at all of your cards in your collection and think about all these different possibilities. So, yeah, I mean, so that's exactly what we want to see, because, when we release 135 cards, those cards alone could be exciting. But really, I think what we're trying to do is you look at those 135 cards multiplied by all the cards that are in your collection, and that's where like all the possibilities and excitements unlock. So, I think in terms of the specifics, we're going to have to see more cards, and we're going to start doing that on November 20th, and they'll kind of give us a better landscape of what's actually in there and not in there, and that will help us speculate all the strategies. But the fact that you're already starting to do your research, like, awesome, great, mission accomplished that we're trying to do.
You should play Hearthstone competitively, right?
Yeah, maybe you should try that.
Have you considered it? It's a wonderful game.
It's kind of my job, but you know, I haven't been doing so great at it.
Well, I do think that that is all the time that we have for this interview. Yong, Dan, thank you guys so much for hanging out with us and
Pleasure to be here.
giving us a peek behind the catacombs curtain. Kobolds and Catacombs and Curtains.
A
So.
dig beneath the tunnel.
Oh yeah, we gave you the secret underground tunnel access
The
to.
underground tour of the catacombs. How many different metaphors can we come up with for this? We've got,
Before Lindsay shuts us down. I don't know.
yeah. But yeah, thank you guys very much for having us. This has been great.
Yeah, thank you for having us. Welcome to BlizzCon 2017. Gosh, hasn't this been the best BlizzCon ever? I say this every year, honestly. Like, this was awesome. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for joining us.
Awesome. Thank you both, and make sure to be tuning into BlizzPro and Well Met for even more awesome Hearthstone Blizzard stuff. Bye.
Take care.
For more BlizzCon 2017 coverage, check us out at blizzpro.com. Subscribe to us here on YouTube or follow us on Twitter and Facebook at BlizzPro.